Welcome to episode 49 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. Before we start, a quick thank you. This episode exists because of a listener, Adolfo, who suggested we talk about Cienciano's Copa Sudamericana win. So to Adolfo, gracias. And to everyone else, if there's a story you think belongs on this podcast, email me at otd@17lostguy.com. I read everything, and I love when the community helps decide where we go next in the history of the beautiful game. It's December 19, 2003, in Arequipa, in southern Peru. We are at the Estadio Monumental de la UNSA. Cienciano, a club from Cusco in the high Andes, have adopted this ground as their home for the Copa Sudamericana, continental regulations and logistics keeping them away from their own altitude fortress in Cusco. Tonight, they play the second leg of the final against River Plate. Yes, River Plate, giants of Buenos Aires, loaded with talent, Javier Mascherano, Lucho Gonzalez, Marcelo Gallardo, Marcelo Salas, and coached by Manuel Pellegrini. Cienciano are the outsiders, making their first real impression beyond Peru. The first leg at the Monumental in Buenos Aires finished 3-3, a wild draw that means tonight, in effect, is a one-game final. By the end of the night, Cienciano will have done something no Peruvian club had ever managed before, win an international trophy. So today, on this pod, we'll trace Cienciano's story and where this sit in Peruvian football. Follow their 2003 Sudamericana run and this final against River. Look at what that trophy meant for Cusco and Peru, and ask the harder question: did it really change the trajectory of Peruvian football, or is it still a glorious one-off? To understand why this matters so much, we need to know who Cienciano are and who they aren't. Cienciano are from Cusco, the historic Inca capital high in the Andes. The club was founded in 1901 by students of the Colegio Nacional de Ciencias, hence the name. For most of the 20th century, they were regional, even provincial, in both senses, representing Cusco with pride, but far from the power centers on the coast. Peruvian football has long been dominated by the Lima giants, Universitario, Alianza, Sporting Cristal. When Peru shined on the world stage in 1970 and 78 with Teofilo Cubillas and that wonderfully expressive national team, the stars mostly come from those clubs. And, as we'll talk about in a future episode, even that golden era ends in controversy. A 0-6 defeat to Argentina at the 1978 World Cup that has been argued about ever since. In continental club football, Peru have had good runs, Universitario reaching the Libertadores final in 1972, Sporting Cristal doing the same in 1997, but never a trophy. The big CONMEBOL titles had gone to Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, occasionally Paraguay or Colombia. Peru are respected but not feared. Cienciano themselves only really break into the national picture at the turn of the century. They are still seen as plucky provincial overachievers, not a club about to change a map. In that context, the idea of Cienciano lifting a South American trophy, overcoming Brazil's Santos, Colombia's Atlético Nacional, and finally Argentina's River Plate in the process, feels closer to fantasy than planning. The Copa Sudamericana itself is new in 2003, only the second edition of CONMEBOL's other tournament, replacing the old Copas, Mercosur and Merconorte. It's a second-tier competition, below the Libertadores, but it gathers serious names. For a club like Cienciano, it's an open door. Their coach is Freire Tenero, a former player turned manager who knows both the realities of Peruvian football and the power of belief. His squad is not star-studded, but is experienced and tight-knit. Oscar Ibanez in goal, Argentinian-born, but a Peru international. Defenders like Santiago Acasiete and Paraguayan centre-back Carlos Lugo. A hard-working midfield with Juan Carlos Bacelar, Cesar Chahuantico, Julio Garcia and Juan Carlos La Rosa. And up front, the journeyman, striker Germán Carti, famous for his airplane goal celebration, alongside names like Rodrigo Saras and Ramon Rodriguez. They're not the kind of players European scouts are flying in to watch, but they are organized, physically strong, and crucially, united around an idea that they can represent Cusco and Peru with something more than just good intentions. The run itself feels like a series of surely this is where it ends moments. First, a preliminary tie against domestic rivals Alianza Lima. Cienciano win it and take the first step. Then Universidad Católica of Chile in the second phase, and Cienciano eliminate them too, sending a Chilean institution home and starting to make rest of the continent look twice at the team from Cusco. In the quarterfinals, they face Santos, One of the great names of Brazilian football and recent Libertadores finalists with a young Robinho and Diego in their ranks. Over 2 legs, Cienciano outplayed them enough to go through 3-2 on aggregate. That in itself would have been a heroic chapter for Peruvian football, a club from Cusco knocking out Santos. But they keep going. In the semi-finals against Atlético Nacional of Medellin, they again find a way. It's not about swagger. It's about narrow wins, altitude, crowd energy, and the sense that something improbable is gathering momentum. By the time the final arrives, Cienciano have already done more than anyone in Peru realistically expected. Their opponents, River Plate, assume that class and depth will eventually tell. The first leg, at their Monumental in Buenos Aires, is a statement. River, playing at home in front of more than 60,000 fans, expect to take a decisive lead. Instead, they get dragged into a rocking 3-3 draw. Cienciano attack bravely, score 3 away goals, and show that they are not intimidated by the shirt or the stadium. When they leave Argentina, they know that any kind of win in the return leg will make them champions of South America's second tournament. Which brings us back to Arequipa, the Estadio Monumental de la UNSA, and the night on this day, December 19, in 2003. Cusco is too high for CONMEBOL's comfort. Arequipa, lower in altitude but still very much an Andean city, becomes Cienciano's home for the final. The stands are packed with fans from Cusco, from Arequipa, from all over Peru, many of whom have traveled long distances by bus to be there. The sense is that this is not just Cienciano's night, it's Peru's. The match itself is tense and scrappy rather than a classic. River have more of the ball. Cienciano fight for every meter. As the second half wears on, the drama ramps up. Around the 78th minute, Cienciano win a free kick. Carlos Lugo, the Paraguayan defender, steps up. His shot is struck cleanly, low and hard. River's keeper, Franco Costanzo, can't keep it out. 1-0 Cienciano. The stadium erupts. What follows is agony. Cienciano suffered 2 red cards. Juan Carlos La Rosa and Julio Garcia sent off, and they finish with 9 men, defending the penalty area as River pour forward. Pellegrini throws on attackers. Mascherano and Gallardo push. Salas lurks, and Cienciano clear, block, chase, cramp, and hold. And when the final whistle goes, Cienciano have done it. They have beaten River Plate 1-0 on the night, 4-3 in aggregate, become the first, and still only, Peruvian club to win a major CONMEBOL title. Their captain lifts the Copa Sudamericana. Freddy Ternero celebrates on the touchline. Ibanez, Lugo, Cartier, and the rest are suddenly, permanently, part of Peruvian football folklore. So what changes afterwards and what doesn't? Well, in the short term, the impact is huge. Cienciano's name is known across the continent. And a year later, in 2004, they add the Recopa by beating Boca Juniors on penalties in Fort Lauderdale, a second continental trophy, again at the expense of an Argentine giant. For Cusco, it's a matter of identity as much as sport. Here's a club from the Andes, historically outside Lima's shadow, proving that it can beat the aristocrats of Buenos Aires and Sao Paulo. Cienciano become a symbol of regional pride, the idea that the historic capital of the Inca Empire now has a club wearing a continental crown. Individually, a few careers are clearly boosted. Santiago Acaciete moves to Almeria in Spain, plays in La Liga and for the national team. Several others become fixtures in Peru's squads or stars in the domestic league. Cienciano themselves add more domestic honors in 2005 and enjoy a period as genuine force in the Peruvian Primera. But if you zoom out, the way we like to do it on this podcast, the picture is more complicated. Peru's national team do not suddenly soar. They continue to struggle through the 2000s and only reach another World Cup in 2018 under Ricardo Gareca, after decades of work on youth development, fitness, and mentality. The Cienciano generation contributes pieces, not a full solution. The domestic league does not transform overnight either. Financial instability, infrastructure gaps, and governance issues remain. Even Cienciano themselves feel the drag. After their high point, they experienced inconsistent seasons, mounting debts, and in 2015 they are relegated to the second division. For several years, the club that once touched the sky is fighting just to get back into the top flight. They eventually return to the first division, but as a mid-table side rather than a new superpower. In CONMEBOL terms, the power axis still runs through Brazil and Argentina, with occasional interventions from Uruguay, Colombia, and Ecuador. The South Americana and Recopa titles remain exceptions, not the start of Peruvian wave. So did that night in Arequipa change everything? At the level of rankings and structural power, probably not. South American football did not suddenly reorder itself because of Cienciano. but at the level of narrative and belief, it changed a lot. It gave Peru, and especially Cusco, a living counterexample to the idea that continental trophies are reserved for a closed club of giants. It proved that a team built on organization, conviction, and a strong local core could beat Santos, Atlético Nacional, River, and Boca in consecutive ties. On this day, 2003, Cienciano showed that the map of South American honors could still be marked in bright red by an outsider and put a permanent star on the chest of a club founded by schoolboys in 1901. That's all for episode 49 of OTD. The night Cienciano of Cusco beat River Plate, lifted the Copa Sudamericana, and gave Peru its first international club trophy. If you, like Adolfo, have a story you want on this podcast to cover, a forgotten cup run, a derby, a scandal, a player, email me at otd@17lawsguy.com. Your tips really do shape where we go next. And if you enjoy these episodes, subscribe and leave us a 5-star review so the algorithm can send more South American football romanticists our way. Tomorrow in episode 50, we'll jump back to 1956 and a very different scene. 103 Atletico Bilbao 3 at Heysel, the last great stand of the legendary 100 team before politics, exile, and history tear it apart. Stay tuned and see you then.